James Wilson adjusted his cap as he walked toward the tall glass building. The morning sun made the windows shine like mirrors. After 15 years building swift deliveries from nothing into a successful company, he still liked to make important deliveries himself. Today's package was special, a signed contract with Oakwood Industries that would help his company grow even bigger. James checked his reflection in the glass doors before entering. His Swift Deliveries uniform was clean and pressed, though simple, just a navy polo shirt with the company logo, khaki pants, and his favorite cap. He had thought about wearing his business suit today but decided against it. He was proud of his company roots and never wanted to forget where he started. The lobby of Oakwood Industries was grand, with marble floors and high ceilings. People in expensive suits walked quickly, talking on phones or to each other. James approached the security desk with confidence, holding his package carefully. The security guard, a man named Bill, looked up at James with cool eyes. "Can I help you?" Bill asked, his tone flat. "Good morning," James said with a warm smile. "I have an important delivery for Mr. Thompson on the 10th floor." Bill barely glanced at the package. "Deliveries go through the back entrance," he said coldly. "I understand, but this is a special delivery," James explained. "I'm actually here to see Mr. Thompson personally. I have the signed contract he's been waiting for." Bill looked James up and down, taking in his simple uniform with the Swift logo. His eyes lingered on James's dark skin. "Like I said, deliveries go through the back. It's our policy. No exceptions." James felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. He'd been here before, many times. He kept his voice steady. "If you could just call up to Mr. Thompson's office, they'll confirm I'm expected." "Sir," Bill interrupted, his voice getting louder. "I need you to leave and use the service entrance at the back of the building. Now." Several well-dressed executives walked past, slowing down to look at what was happening. A woman in a red suit raised her eyebrows but kept walking. No one said anything. James felt all their eyes on him. He could feel his heart beating faster, but his face remained calm. He had built his business by choosing his battles carefully. "I see," James said quietly. "Thank you for your help." As he turned to leave, he heard Bill mutter something under his breath. James didn't turn around. He walked out through the glass doors with his head high. Outside, James stood for a moment, feeling the weight of what had just happened. It wasn't the first time. Probably wouldn't be the last. His father's voice echoed in his mind, "It's not what they call you, it's what you answer to." In the quiet of his car, James sat still, holding the steering wheel tightly. He thought of his father, who had worked 2 jobs delivering packages to help pay for James's business school. How many times had he faced the same treatment? How many doors had been closed in his face? James had options. He could call Mr. Thompson directly. He could tell the guard who he really was, that he wasn't just a delivery man but the owner and CEO of Swift Deliveries. He could send someone else with the package and avoid the whole situation. He looked at the package on the passenger seat. Inside was the contract that would expand his company into 3 new states, a deal worth millions. Something he had worked toward for years. James started the car and drove around to the back of the building. The service entrance was busy with delivery trucks and maintenance workers. He parked in a spot marked "Deliveries Only" and walked to the service desk. A tired-looking man asked for his ID and had him sign a visitor log. James followed directions through narrow, poorly lit hallways until he reached the mailroom. "Package for Mr. Thompson," he told the clerk. "He needs to sign for it himself." The clerk nodded, not really looking at James. "I'll make sure he gets it." As James walked back to his car, he wasn't angry. He was thinking. Thinking about what this moment could teach everyone involved, including himself. Sometimes the most powerful response wasn't to fight or to give up, but to find a third way. He would deliver this package. And then he would wait for the right moment to deliver something much more important. Understanding point. 2 hours later, James sat in his downtown office. The view from his window showed the city skyline, including the distant shape of the Oakwood Industries building. His office was modest but tasteful. James had never been one for showing off, even after his company had become successful. His assistant, Emma, knocked on the door before entering. "The Andrews contract is ready for your signature," she said, placing a folder on his desk. "Thank you, Emma." James picked up his pen, but his mind was still at Oakwood. He wondered if Mr. Thompson had received the package yet. As if on cue, his phone rang. The display showed Robert Thompson, Oakwood Industries. James took a deep breath and answered. "James Wilson speaking." "James. Robert Thompson here. Just got your contract, fantastic news. Our team is thrilled about working with Swift Deliveries." Robert's voice sounded cheerful and warm. "I'm glad to hear that, Robert. We're looking forward to the partnership as well. Listen, my assistant mentioned something strange. She said you delivered the package yourself? Is that true?" James paused before answering. "Yes, that's correct. But why didn't you come up to see me? We could have had coffee, gone over the details in person." Another pause. "I tried." Security had other ideas. A long silence followed. James could almost hear Robert thinking on the other end of the line. "I see," Robert finally said, his voice tight. "What exactly happened, James?" James explained the situation simply, without emotion. He didn't exaggerate or complain. He just told the story as it had happened. When he finished, the silence returned, longer this time. "James, I want to apologize in person," Robert said eventually. "Would you join me for lunch tomorrow? My office, 1 p.m.? "Yes, that would be fine." After hanging up, James sat back in his chair. He wasn't looking for an apology. He had learned long ago that holding on to anger only hurt himself. What he wanted was understanding, not just from Robert Thompson, but from everyone at Oakwood. That evening, James had dinner with his brother, Michael. They sat in James's kitchen, eating the stew their mother had taught them to make. "You should have told that guard exactly who you are," Michael said when James told him about the morning's events. "Put him in his place." James shook his head. "And what would that have achieved?" "Respect," Michael said firmly. "They need to know they can't treat people like that." "Forcing respect isn't the same as earning it," James replied. "Tomorrow, I'll walk into that building differently. And it won't just be me who learns something." The next morning, James stood in front of his closet. He chose his best suit, dark blue, perfectly tailored. He added a crisp white shirt and the red tie his daughter had given him for his birthday. He looked at himself in the mirror and smiled at the memory of his father doing the same thing years ago. "Dress for the job you want, not the job you have," his father had always said. At exactly 12:45 p.m., James pulled into the Oakwood Industries parking lot. This time, he used the front entrance. He had decided not to arrive early. He would not be made to wait. The same security guard, Bill, sat at the desk. When James approached, Bill didn't recognize him at first. His eyes moved from James's face to his expensive suit, then back again. Confusion crossed his face as recognition dawned. "Good afternoon," James said politely. "I have a 1 p.m. appointment with Mr. Thompson." Before Bill could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Robert Thompson himself stepped out. He was a tall man with gray hair and glasses, dressed in a suit similar to James's. "James. Glad you could make it," Robert called, walking quickly across the lobby. He extended his hand. "I came down to meet you personally." James shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Robert." As they turned toward the elevator, James nodded politely to Bill, whose face had turned a deep shade of red. In the elevator, Robert pressed the button for the top floor. "James, I want you to know how sorry I am about yesterday. That's not how we do business at Oakwood." James looked Robert in the eye. "It's not about me, Robert. It's about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else who walks through those doors." The elevator continued upward, carrying both men toward a conversation that would change not just their partnership, but the culture of an entire company. Robert's office was on the top floor of the Oakwood building. Large windows showed views of the entire city. James could even see the small warehouse where he had started Swift Deliveries 15 years ago. "Please, have a seat," Robert said, pointing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "Lunch will be here shortly." James sat down, feeling the soft leather of the chair. He noticed a photo on Robert's desk, a younger Robert with an older man in front of a small shop. "Is that your father?" James asked. Robert picked up the frame, smiling at the photo. "Yes. That's the hardware store where I worked every summer growing up. Dad started with just that one small shop. Now Oakwood makes building supplies for the whole country." He set the photo down. "What about you? How did Swift Deliveries begin?" "With one van and a lot of hope," James said. "I delivered packages myself for the first 3 years. Worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week." Robert nodded. "And now?" 200 drivers, 3 warehouses, and contracts in 5 states. James smiled. "Soon to be 8 states, thanks to our new partnership." A knock at the door interrupted them. Robert's assistant brought in lunch, sandwiches, salad, and drinks on a tray. As they ate, Robert became serious. "James, about yesterday. I've already spoken with our head of security. Bill has been with us for 10 years, but that's no excuse for how you were treated." James put down his sandwich. "What did he say when you told him who I was?" "He was shocked, embarrassed. Said he was just following building policy about deliveries." Robert shook his head. "But we both know there was more to it than that." "The policy itself isn't the problem," James said carefully. "It's how differently it gets applied depending on who walks through your door." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You're right," he finally said. "And I suspect this isn't the first time something like this has happened here." "Probably not," James agreed. "But it could be the last." After lunch, Robert suggested they walk through the building. They visited different departments: accounting, marketing, product development. James noticed something important: almost everyone looked the same. There were few people who looked like him. In the elevator going back up, Robert seemed to read his thoughts. "We have a diversity problem, don't we?" James nodded. "It's not just about having different faces in the room, Robert. It's about different perspectives, different experiences." When they returned to Robert's office, he asked James to sit again. "I need your help," he said. "What would you do if this were your company?" James thought carefully before answering. "First, I talk to everyone, from the security desk to the executive floor, about what happened and why it matters. Not to shame anyone, but to teach. Second, I'd look at every policy that might create barriers for certain people. And third, I'd start bringing in talented people from backgrounds you don't currently have represented." Robert took notes as James spoke. "This won't be easy," he said. "Change never is," James replied. "But necessary things rarely are." Before James left, Robert walked him back to the lobby. The security desk had a different guard now, a woman who smiled and wished them both a good afternoon. As they shook hands goodbye, Robert said, "Our contract may be about deliveries, James, but I think we've started something much more important today." News traveled fast. By the end of the week, the story had spread throughout Oakwood Industries: how security had turned away the CEO of their newest business partner, mistaking him for just a delivery man because of his race. Some employees were embarrassed. Others were defensive, saying it could have happened to anyone. But most understood that this moment had revealed something important about their company culture. 3 days after his lunch with Robert, James received an email inviting him to speak at an all-company meeting at Oakwood the following week. The subject line read, "Helping us see what we've been missing." That evening, James called his father to tell him about everything that had happened. "Are you going to do it?" his father asked. "Speak at their meeting?" James looked at a photo on his own desk. His father in his old delivery uniform, standing proudly next to his truck. "Yes," James said. Some deliveries are more important than others. The Oakwood Industries meeting room was full. Employees from every department sat waiting. James stood near the front, watching people find their seats. Robert had told him to expect around 50 people. There were at least 200. Robert stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I want to be clear about why we're here. Last week, something happened that opened my eyes. It made me realize we need to do better. Not just say the right words, but take real action." He turned to James. James Wilson is the founder and CEO of Swift Deliveries, our newest business partner. James, thank you for being brave enough to share your experience with us. James walked to the front of the room. He wasn't nervous. He had spoken to groups before. But this was different. This wasn't about business strategies or delivery logistics. This was personal. "Good morning," he began. "I'm not here to make anyone feel bad. I'm here because what happened to me happens to people every day. People who don't get the chance to come back and talk about it." James told the story simply. How he'd been turned away. How he'd gone to the service entrance rather than cause trouble. How no one had questioned it. "But here's what I want you to understand," he continued. "This isn't just about one security guard or one policy. It's about the small ways we judge people every day without even realizing it." He paused, looking around the room. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in understanding. "Do you know why I still make deliveries sometimes, even though I own the company?" The room was silent. "Because every person in my company matters. The delivery drivers aren't just anything, they're the face of my business. When I started Swift, I was the delivery man, the accountant, the customer service person, everything. I never want to forget that." James noticed a man in the back row, the security guard, Bill. He wasn't scheduled to work today, but he had come anyway. James made eye contact with him briefly before continuing. "What happened wasn't just about me. It happens to people who look like me every day, people who don't have the power to walk into your office afterward and talk about it." After James finished speaking, Robert announced new initiatives, a review of all company policies, training programs, and a community outreach plan to bring more diverse candidates into their hiring process. As people began to leave, Bill approached James. His face was red, and his hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I treated you badly, and there's no excuse for it." James looked at the man. He saw shame there, but also something else, a desire to do better. "Thank you for saying that," James replied. "And for coming today. That couldn't have been easy." "No, sir, it wasn't," Bill admitted. "But it was necessary. I've worked here for 10 years, and I never thought about how I might be treating people differently. I just thought I was doing my job." They talked for a few more minutes. Bill mentioned his grandson, who wanted to start a business someday. James gave him his card. "Tell him to call me," James said. "I'm always happy to talk with young entrepreneurs." Later that afternoon, James sat in Robert's office again. The meeting had gone well, but they both knew it was just a beginning. "We're creating a community apprenticeship program," Robert explained. "Bringing in young people from underserved neighborhoods to learn about our business. Would Swift Deliveries be interested in partnering with us on this?" James smiled. "Absolutely. In fact, I have some ideas already." On his drive home, James called his brother Michael. "How did it go?" Michael asked. "Better than I expected," James replied. "I think they really want to change." "Because they got caught," Michael said skeptically. "Maybe that's how it started," James admitted. "But I saw something real there today. People connecting with the story. Understanding it wasn't just about me." He told Michael about Bill's apology and the new apprenticeship program. "So good things can come from bad situations," Michael said, sounding surprised. "They can if we choose to make them happen," James replied. Change doesn't just happen on its own. Someone has to be brave enough to start the conversation. That evening, James sat on his porch, watching the sunset. His phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Board approved all our proposals today. Thank you for helping us see what we've been missing." James smiled. The contract with Oakwood Industries was important for his business. But what had started from that uncomfortable moment in the lobby might end up being even more valuable for everyone involved. 6 months had passed since the day James Wilson had been turned away from the Oakwood Industries lobby. The morning air was crisp as he parked his car and walked toward the now familiar building. The trees along the walkway were just starting to change color, hints of orange and red appearing among the green. James smiled at the memories of his first visit. So much had changed since then. As he entered the lobby, he noticed the changes immediately. The security desk had been redesigned. It was lower, more welcoming, less like a barrier. Behind it sat Lisa, one of the new security officers Oakwood had hired. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," she said with a warm smile. "Mr. Thompson is expecting you." "Good morning, Lisa. How's your son doing with his new delivery job?" Lisa beamed. "Loving it. He can't thank you enough for the recommendation." James nodded, pleased. Lisa's son had been one of the first participants in the apprenticeship program. Now he worked part-time at Swift Deliveries while attending community college. In the elevator, James thought about the past 6 months. The partnership between Swift and Oakwood had grown stronger than either company had expected. Their business together had already expanded into 2 additional states beyond what they had initially planned. But the business success wasn't what made James most proud. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Robert Thompson was waiting with a broad smile. They shook hands warmly. "Just in time," Robert said. "Everyone's ready in the conference room." They walked together down the hallway, which was now decorated with photographs of Oakwood employees from all backgrounds working together, serving the community, and celebrating company milestones. "How many today?" James asked. 20 new apprentices," Robert replied proudly. "From 5 different neighborhoods. And 3 of last year's group are now full-time employees." The conference room was filled with young faces, eager and a little nervous. These were the new participants in the Oakwood Swift Apprenticeship Program, young people from underserved neighborhoods learning about business, operations, and management. Robert introduced James to the group. "This is James Wilson, CEO of Swift Deliveries and co-founder of our apprenticeship program." His story is what inspired all of this. James looked around the room at the diverse group of young people. Some reminded him of himself at that age, full of potential but facing barriers that others didn't have to deal with. "Welcome to Oakwood," James began. "And to Swift. For the next 6 months, you'll be learning from both our companies. Some of you may find jobs with us afterward. Others might take what you learn and start your own businesses. Either way, we're investing in you because we believe in you." He told them about starting Swift Deliveries with just 1 van. About the long hours and hard work. About the obstacles he'd faced and overcome. "But I also want to tell you about the day I was turned away from this very building," he said. "Because what matters most isn't what happens to you, it's how you respond to it." After the meeting, as the apprentices were being taken on a tour of the building, James and Robert walked back to Robert's office. "I've got something to show you," Robert said, leading James down a different hallway. They stopped in front of a wall where a large, framed mission statement hung. It was new. James hadn't seen it before. The last line caught his eye: "We see the value and potential in every person who comes through our doors." "The board approved the new mission statement last week," Robert explained. "Your words, more or less." James smiled. "It's not just words that matter. It's the actions behind them." Speaking of actions, Robert continued, pulling out his phone. "Look at these photos from our community event last weekend." He showed James pictures of Oakwood employees, including Bill, the security guard from James's first visit, working alongside Swift employees to build a playground in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. "Bill's become one of our most active volunteers," Robert said. "Says he's making up for lost time." As they reached Robert's office, James noticed a familiar face waiting outside, a young woman in a Swift Deliveries uniform. "Mr. Wilson," she said, "I have a package for Mr. Thompson. Needs his signature." "Thank you, Emma," James said to his former assistant, now Swift's operations manager. The promotion had been well earned. Robert signed for the package with a smile. Front door service. Just as it should be. Later, as James drove back to his office, he thought about how one uncomfortable moment had sparked so much positive change. The partnership had benefited both companies financially, but its real value went far beyond money. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with a moment of discomfort and the courage to face it honestly rather than walk away. James had learned that lesson long ago from his father. Now, that wisdom was creating ripples that would benefit many others for years to come.